On March 13, 1996, an armed gunman named Thomas Hamilton opened fire inside a primary school in Dunblane, Scotland, murdering 16 children and one teacher before shooting himself, shattering the peaceful country town of Dunblane, Stirlingshire, and sending shockwaves around not just Scotland, but the world. The Dunblane Massacre is the deadliest school shooting the UK has ever seen, and it opened the path for major gun regulation. Thomas Watt Hamilton was born in Glasgow, Scotland on May 10, 1952. Hamilton never met his father and mistook his mother's adoptive parents for his own parents when he was a child. He was legally adopted when he was 2 years old. Whilst growing up, Thomas was told and believed that his mother, who was a hotel cleaner at the time, was his sister. It was only when he was 22 years old that he finally was told the truth. At the age of 20, Hamilton became an assistant Boy Scout leader, but his behavior with the boys quickly drew suspicion. He was forced to leave after a series of complaints. He requested and was denied permission to return several times, and he filed letters of protest to various government officials, alleging that he was being wrongfully persecuted. Meanwhile, he started collecting guns and organized a number of boys' clubs where he taught shooting, gymnastics, and athletics. Initially, his clubs were popular and well-attended, but his supposedly strange behavior alienated club members and their parents, and the clubs were forced to close due to dwindling numbers. Hamilton was known within Dunblane as an obsessed misfit who bottled up his paranoia, resentment, and was dubbed Mr. Creepy by his peers. On Wednesday, March 13, 1996, Thomas Hamilton, who was now 43 years old, was spotted scraping ice off his van outside of his home in Stirling on Kent Road at approximately 8:15. He left in his white van a short time later, driving about 5 minutes north to Dunblane. He pulled up at Dunblane Primary School just after 9:30 a.m., parking his van near a telegraph pole in the school's car park. With a pair of pliers, Hamilton severed the lines at the bottom of the telegraph pole, which supplied surrounding houses, before making his way across the parking lot to the school's buildings, meaning that no phone calls could be made. Hamilton went to a door near the restrooms and the school gymnasium on the northwest side of the school. He walked into the gym with two 9mm Browning HP pistols and two Smith & Wesson M19.357 Magnum revolvers, all of which were legal to carry at the time. He also carried 743 rounds of ammunition on him. A class of 28 Primary 1 students were preparing for a PE lesson in the gym, with the help of 3 adult staff members. He is suspected of shooting 2 rounds into the assembly hall stage and the girls' restroom before entering the gymnasium. When Eileen Harold, the course's PE teacher, approached him, Hamilton began shooting quickly and randomly, intending to kill everyone he could see. He shot Harold, injuring her arms and chest as she sought to defend herself, and then continued shooting into the arena. Harold and a bevy of injured kids staggered into the open-plan storeroom off to the side of the gym. Gwen Mayer, a teacher at the school, was shot and killed while working with students in the Primary 1 class. Mary Blake, a teaching assistant, was wounded in the head and legs, but she was able to drag herself into the storage closet in front of several children. Hamilton had fired 29 rounds with one of the pistols after entering the gymnasium and taking a few steps, killing one child and injuring numerous others. 4 injured children, in addition to Harold and Blake, had sought safety in the store cupboard. Hamilton then made his way along the gym's east side, firing 6 bullets before firing 8 shots in the opposite way. He then walked to the center of the gym, where he fired 16 shots at a crowd of children who had been knocked out by his previous shots. After this, a Primary 7 student was walking along the west side of the gymnasium when they heard sounds of loud bangs and screaming. Upon hearing this, the child went inside to see what was going on. When they walked in, Hamilton fired a shot in his direction, injuring the student with flying glass before fleeing. Hamilton fired 24 cartridges in different directions, aiming at anyone and everyone that he could see. He fired 4 rounds through a window near the gym's southeast fire escape, most likely targeting an adult walking across the playground. Then he unlocked the fire exit door and fired 4 more rounds in the same direction. After momentarily leaving the gym through the fire exit, Hamilton fired 4 more shots into the library's cloakroom, shooting and wounding Grace Tweedle, another school employee. Catherine Gordon, who was teaching her primary 7 class in the mobile classroom closest to the fire escape, where Hamilton was positioned, saw him firing shots and ordered her students to lie down on the floor before Hamilton fired 9 bullets into the classroom, impacting books and equipment. 1 bullet pierced a chair in which a child had been sitting just a few seconds before. Hamilton then returned to the gym, dropping the pistol he was holding and picking up a revolver. He put the barrel of the revolver into his mouth, pointed it upwards, and pulled the trigger, killing himself. Over the course of 3 to 4 minutes, Hamilton shot 32 people, 16 of whom were killed in the gymnasium. Another child died on the way to the hospital later in the day. The police were first called by the school's headmaster, Ron Taylor, at 9:41 a.m., when assistant headmistress Angus Olson informed him of the likelihood of a gunman on the campus. Olson had also told Taylor that she heard screams inside the gymnasium and saw what she thought were cartridges on the ground, while Taylor had heard loud noises from the construction site that he had not been warned about. When the shooting stopped, while he was on his way to the gym, he went back to his office and urged Deputy Headmistress Fiona Eadington to call for emergency services, which she did at 9:43 a.m. At 9:57 a.m., the first ambulance, responding to a 999 call placed just 14 minutes prior. At 10:04 a.m., a medical team from Dunblane Health Center came, consisting of doctors and a nurse who assisted with the initial resuscitation of the injured. Soon after, medical crews from the neighboring towns of Doon and Callander arrived. The Stirling Royal Infirmary's accident and emergency department were alerted to a serious event involving several casualties at 9:48 a.m., and the first of several medical teams from the hospital arrived at 10:15 a.m. At 10:35 a.m., a medical team from the Falkirk and District Royal Infirmary arrived. All of the injured victims were taken to Stirling Royal Infirmary for treatment at 11:10 a.m. 1 victim died on the way to the hospital. Several of the injured children were taken to Glasgow's Royal Hospital for Sick Children, while others were taken to Falkirk and District Royal Infirmary in Falkirk for treatment. It was one of Scotland's worst mass casualties in history. It is one of the deadliest criminal acts involving firearms in UK history, alongside the Hungerford Massacre in 1987 and the Cumbria shootings in 2010. Hamilton then returned to the gymnasium and fired another round of rounds. He then pulled out his revolver and shot himself in the head. The onslaught lasted only 5 minutes in all. The following people were among the victims of the tragedy. Gwen Mayer is a 45-year-old woman. Victoria, 5-year-old Elizabeth Clydesdale. Emma Elizabeth Crozier, 5 years old. Emily Morton, 5 years old. Sophia Jane Lockwood North, 5 years old. John Petrie, 5 years old. Melissa Helen Curry, 5 years old. Kevin Allen Hassel, 5 years old. David Charles Kerr, age 5. William Irving, age 5. Mahali Isabel Macbeth, age 5. Abigail Joanne McLennan, age 5. Joanna Caroline Ross, age 5. Caroline Louise Dunn, age 5. Hannah Louise Scott, age 5. Megan Turner, age 5. Brett McKinnon, age 6. Thomas Hamilton's motivations for the attack have never been completely agreed upon by the public and law enforcement. According to some claims, he was turned down as a volunteer at Dunblane Primary School days before the attack. This was the tip of the iceberg for Thomas. Another theory is that Thomas did not intend to harm children when the massacre occurred. Instead, it is said that Hamilton's objective was to murder the headmaster. He intended to do that during morning assembly on March 13th, 1996, specifically in front of the primary 7 children. Staff at Dunblane Primary School had warned families not to allow their children to attend Thomas Hamilton's Boys Club. In retaliation, Thomas wanted the headmaster dead. Ron Taylor, the head teacher, humiliated Hamilton in his opinion by warning the boys in assembly not to speak to him. He intended to exact vengeance, but his scheme was thwarted. As a result, the bloodbath occurred. On March 19, 1996, 6 days after the massacre, Thomas Hamilton's remains were held in neighboring Falkirk and cremated in a secret ceremony, which only his mother and her friend attended. His mother and the friend afterwards recounted how they were driven 60 miles from their Stirling homes in unmarked police cars to Dundee for his cremation. They changed vehicles twice on their trip to the crematorium, where an after-hours service was held, to ensure that they were not followed. Angus Watt, Thomas's mother, is said to have collapsed when the casket containing her son's body vanished behind the curtains. Thomas Hamilton's ashes were never released to his family. In fact, his ashes remain a mystery. Nobody knows where they are, even to this day. After the massacre, residents of Dunblane launched the Snowdrop campaign to improve British gun regulations in the aftermath of the killing. A petition started by the Snowdrop campaign gained over 750,000 signatures, and 2 national newspapers published a letter written by the mother of one of the slain children. In February 1997, Parliament passed a law prohibiting private ownership of handguns with calibers greater than .22. And in November 1997, the ban was expanded to include all handguns. Furthermore, the security requirements for gun clubs have been increased. Following the enactment of those restrictions, the number of gun murders in the United Kingdom decreased dramatically. Following the Dunblane Massacre and 2 other violent incidents south of the border around the same time, school security was improved, particularly in primary schools. These incidents included the murder of Philip Lawrence, a head teacher in London, and the wounding of 6 children and Lisa Potts, a nursery teacher at a Wolverhampton nursery school. Many schools constructed high perimeter fences and installed door entry systems that are still operational today. Evidence of prior police interactions with Hamilton was given to an inquiry, but it was later sealed under a closure order, preventing disclosure for the next 100 years. The rationale given to the public for keeping the documents sealed was to safeguard children's names. But this sparked charges of a cover-up to preserve officials' reputations. Following Lord Advocate Colin Boyd's review of the closure order in October 2005, updated versions of some pages in the inquiry were still made available to the public, with a lot of information still redacted. To prevent upsetting the relatives and survivors, 4 files comprising postmortems, medical records, and profiles on the victim were sealed under the 100-year order. The Child Protection Unit revealed complaints made to Central Scotland Police after Hamilton's Loch Lomond summer camp in 1997. According to the records, Hamilton was charged with 10 counts by the prosecutor fiscal, including assault, impending police, and violating the Children and Young Persons Act 1937. There was no action taken. The Dunblane Massacre is the last ever recorded school shooting in the UK. The anger and pain brought on by this shooting enacted such fierce gun control laws that there hasn't been another since.